Hi, you're watching Russell Market Week in Review for the week ending January 23rd, 2015. We're coming to you this week as we do each week from our trading floor here in Seattle, Washington. I'm Mark Supasay, and I'm joined today by our Managing Director for Asset Allocation and Portfolio Strategy, Adam Goff. Adam, so good to have you back on the program.
Great to be here.
Glad to have you. Let's start. We had obviously some big news this week. Wanted to start in Europe, where actually this time last week we had an announcement out of Switzerland that they were going to no longer peg their franc to the euro. Talk about that news and how big of a deal should that be for investors?
Well, it was a surprise, and surprise always gets a lot of excitement going. Unlike what happened later in the week with the ECB, this was something that people really hadn't been anticipating at all.
Okay.
But essentially what happened was the Swiss central bank decided to abandon its peg, which was a sort of set exchange rate with the euro, which actually required a lot of, it's one of these things that seemed very placid on the surface, but there was a lot of duck feet pedaling under the surface, where essentially they were having to buy euros and sell Swiss francs to keep the value of the Swiss franc from going up too much. They decided the cost was too much. They saw the likelihood of QE coming down the road from ECB, and that the outcome of this was a massive spike up of the franc versus the euro, and a lot of collateral damage among organizations who were expecting the placidity of that relationship to stay. You know, in terms of the importance of the event, we don't see it as a massive event, more a symptom of the larger changes that are going on, what we expect to happen with the ECB and the ECB balance sheet. And it just puts pressure on other economies that want to keep certain relationships in terms of currency. The term currency wars has been thrown around this week. I'm not sure we'd engage in that level of hyperbole, but there definitely are tensions that are created by these currency moves and by the changes in monetary policy and the global decoupling of central bank policy, which we've been talking about really since for many months now. We see as a big theme for this year.
Sure. So then by and large, I think as we moved into this week, the market's attention shifted to several other news items, both here in the US and China and others, and really a fairly positive week for equities, certainly around the globe. Talk about some of those factors, and again, how big of a deal is that? What should investors be paying attention to? Yeah,
there's nothing really alarming. I mean, once the Swiss news was sort of digested and people took it on board, you know, you saw decent, GDP kind of numbers come out of China. Always there's a question mark on the veracity of those numbers, but they were backed up by other relatively good numbers. The HSBC Purchasing Manager Index later in the week. Nothing alarming there. Earnings numbers were okay, not great. A little bit of negative guidance here and there, but some okay earnings numbers. Revenues basically flat. Housing numbers, we had the November home price index numbers come through. Nice rise. Not all the housing numbers were super positive, but nothing to alarm the market. Most eyes were focused on the Thursday announcement that was coming from Draghi and the ECB.
And so then let's talk about that as we kind of wrap up. Thursday, big news yesterday with regard to what they're intending with regard to stimulus. Tell me about that. What's your view on what we should be looking for going forward?
Well, to borrow a phrase from Don Rumsfeld, this was a known unknown. This is something we'd been marking on our calendars for a long time. We knew Draghi was going to need to make an announcement. The pressure was building given the perception of deflationary pressures, the distance from the medium-term inflation expectations target that the ECB had was big, and there was a need for him to step up and deliver. And the question mark to torture the stepping up to the plate metaphor a little bit more was, what we didn't know, what the unknown part of it was he going to have a bat in his hand? Was he going to be able to take the action that he needed to get QE going in earnest in Europe? And was he going to hit the ball? Was it going to be large enough? Was he going to have the right, set the right expectations?
And pretty clearly answered those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he absolutely hit the target in all cases. 60 billion euros per month. First there was some talk about a September 2016 end date. Since then there's been more talk about it being an open-ended commitment. It does feel like he's all in on trying to raise inflation expectations, and in general the market has responded well. The euro's continued to go down as you would expect, but there's been some nice modest returns. I mean, the other question that we didn't really know going into this was how much of this was already expected and priced into the market. It seemed a lot of this was, but there was still a little bit of positive surprise at the 1 trillion plus magnitude and the fact that it was mostly focused on purchases of government bonds.
So just as we go forward then, what are things investors should be keeping an eye on then? What are the big questions that need to be answered still?
Well, first of all, I mean, we've got to see Europe deliver. I mean, last year there was a lot of fanfare around the TLTRO. The actual impact on the ECB balance sheet was not that great. and it was a bit of a disappointment.
Okay.
There are actors within strong, powerful actors within Europe who are not thrilled about the idea of QE.
Yeah.
If Draghi can follow through, make it happen, no barriers are put in his way, that'll be a great sign. We're positive about Europe. We're optimistic about Draghi accomplishing good things, and we don't see that as the only positive thing about Europe. Okay. We see some positive things to be positive about in terms of earnings numbers, and so we're optimistic on that front going forward. In the U.S., and there's a bigger thematic question going on, which is the ongoing rebalancing of the U.S. economy away from this energy powerhouse, which obviously has been hampered seriously by the fall in the oil price, towards the beneficial effects of, first of all these jobs that we've created over the last couple of years, seeing that filter through the economy, seeing that create greater consumption, greater housing, potentially some of the benefits of oil costs going down, coming through CapEx, et cetera. We're looking to see those effects come through. We're seeing some signs of that, but there's a lot to be played out in future numbers. The next big number we're going to be focused on is on the 30th of January, the employment cost index, which we're looking to see if there are signs of some wage increases, which again will be a sign that the economy's moving forward, and that will also give us some insight into what the FOMC might be thinking about. And that's the other thing next week, is the FOMC is going to be coming out with its scheduled statement and policy decision.
Well, certainly plenty of things for us to keep an eye on, and as always, Adam, we appreciate your time and insights today. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
For those, and we thank you for joining us on Russell Market Week in Review. We'll see you next week.